Hey guys, Benji here with the question of the week. So, question of the week is, what is one of your favorite memories of your mother? So, Beth Lewis. Um, so right now I'm doing this video. It is January of 2026, and my mom has dementia, just like her siblings, Keith and Kathy, my aunt and uncle, and so, yeah, mom's not the same that she used to be. Um, I'm glad that Sierra probably remembers mom the way she used to be, but probably not a lot, right? You just don't notice the health of your grandmother when maybe you're 12, right? Sierra's 23. So, and for the last 10 years, mom's been bad. For the last 5 is when it's really bad. Um, So it's too bad. But and I guess I only say that because, you know, mom was different than she is, you know, now, of course, right? She has dementia, she doesn't remember anything, and can't yeah, she's not like living like a normal human anymore. She can't do things. She can't live on her own, right? She relies solely on dad to do everything for her. So, but as far as my favorite memories, I think the things that I remember most about mom is, um, I think it's just the little things that she would do. Because, and I think maybe Kit and Katie might have different stories. Um, but I think when Josh and I were growing up with mom and dad, we were poor, right? We say that all the time. We joke about that. First family was poor, second family got rich. And, because like Katie got a nice car when she turned 16. Kit had 2 or 3 trucks. And I'm like, what? We got a Datsun 210 and a beat up. I mean, we just, yeah. It was a different time. It was a decade later, right? And so dad was in a different position of making money. Mom was always a teacher. But I just think it was a little harder. It was harder on them. And so, in other words, there wasn't enough time and there wasn't money to, like, go, maybe do some crazy things. And so I think, and to be honest, mom, I mean, what would it have been? Kit is 10 years younger than me. So let's say when I was 11, Kit was 1. And then Katie was born, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later. So I'm 14 maybe. And then till I was 17. And then right when I was 18, I went to college, right? Because I'm like the youngest of my high school class because of my birthday. I think the official cutoff was August 1st. I'm July 31st. And now some kids, because back then they used to think, oh, you should put them forward and they'll excel. What they know now is like, no, hold them back. But there were some kids, Ty Ketchum, Ryan O'Shaughnessy, that were younger than me, but not very many. Out of 800, 900 kids, I'm one of the youngest 5 or 10, I'll say. So I was 17. So from the time I was 11 to 17, mom and dad were raising a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And so there wasn't a lot of time for that. So, they have 4 kids. One is old and driving, and maybe that's me. I'm kind of gone on my own. And then they're raising Josh and 2 little kids still. And raising Josh, as we all know, that's a job in itself. Josh is a hellion. He's a crazy man. And so of like the I don't have stories of like there was that time where, you know, my mom and I went and did something, you know, extravagant together. We just didn't do that, right? There was 4 kids and it was tough. I have all sorts of stories about where we got help from other people and we were poor and that was fine. I have said to everybody in our circle, when I say circle, I mean cul-de-sac growing up, we all said we had the perfect childhood, and I still stand by that. We were poor, but I didn't notice that. It's more of a joke now. But I think so. So I don't have those extravagant ideas. I don't have. Sierra and I have this whole thing where her and I went on these cheer trips. That were $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and we did these. Even if it's a weekend to Indy, you have these. $1,500, $2,000 weekend getaways from maybe Thursday or at least Friday morning until Sunday night or Monday. So you have a lot of time together and you have all these experiences, and it's made us incredibly close. But we didn't have that just because we didn't have that kind of money, and we just didn't do that. They were raising little kids by the time that I was, when I was a teenager, right? They were just raising Kid and Katie. But back to the question, what is your favorite memories of your mother? And so I've got a couple, and they're tiny. One of the things is that it didn't matter how busy mom was or how stressed out, is that when it was your birthday, she made whatever you want. And I was probably, this probably made her my favorite birthday dinner, because I think Josh had like homemade noodles, chicken and noodles, which was hard. My favorite meal, and still one of my favorites today, is meatloaf, scalloped potatoes, and corn. Man, nowadays you throw on a third vegetable of green beans, and yeah, that's where we're at. And then any kind of bread with that. Woo, yeah. And that's all I need. And so mom would do that every year. And so it was just a little gesture of, it didn't matter the stress of life or what was going on, but you still got that. I love that. But maybe a lot of parents do that. What mom would do was, because they had it hard. I actually do believe this. So like when I was like, I can remember 8th grade, 9th grade basketball, and a lot of times mom would be the one to pick me up, because maybe we had practice at, I can hardly remember, 3 o'clock. Probably we got out at like 2:15, I think. And so 3 o'clock till 5 o'clock, and I need to get picked up. Well, mom was teaching. She's the only one home. So she's putting kids in the car, or Josh is watching them and she's coming to get me real fast. But instead of just showing up with nothing, she would have, and I can still remember this, like an oatmeal cream pie sitting in the seat for me to get into. And I was like, oh man, that's so awesome. And she would always have these little treats like that. So it just wasn't a very like big thing, and I get kind of teary-eyed thinking about it. Probably because, yeah. It's just, yeah. Whew, man. Whew. She's just not able to do that kind of stuff anymore. She doesn't know any of that stuff. Jeez, man, I did not think I was gonna do this. Just saying she was sweet, but I think it's all that they could do, right? Just to have some little thing. I never got, it just wasn't, big extravagant shows of things. I just, woo, man. Well, that's a rough one. Jeez. But anyway, woo. Yeah, I think that was all that they could do. But it was a ton, because the funny part is that I could remember those times, and mom didn't really like driving the van. We had a big huge like conversion van that had like a couch in the back and a fan and all that fun stuff. It was kind of a thing back then. But when you had 4 kids, you had to come up. I mean, we're talking pre-minivans almost. They didn't have the what was it? Dodge Caravan. It was so. It was like the first and best like minivan. You're like, what the heck is that vehicle? Oh my gosh! But before that, you just had vans. And yet, when you have 4 kids, and maybe you've taken another kid to practice with somebody, yeah, you had to have a big car. So we did. We had the van. Mom didn't like that. So in other words, she's coming to pick me up in the Datsun 210. And that's where I can just remember in the blue seats, like a little oatmeal cream pie or a Twinkie or something little. And to be honest, that was a splurge. Now, yeah, yeah, still was a splurge. This is probably seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade basketball practice because it was winter, it was cold, it was just funny. And so I just remember those little things that she would do. Now I do remember one time that I thought, oh my gosh, this is what it's like to be Kit and Katie. Is we went to, I forget where we were. We were going down to the plaza. We were going to eat at Houston's, but I don't remember what for. Yeah, I don't remember. But anyway, Dad had to stay in Houston's to, back then you didn't have like pagers, you didn't have anything. You had to like stand there and wait for your name to be called. So they couldn't like text you and say, "Hey, your table's ready." So Dad had to stay, and Mom was like, "Well, let's go next door." And I don't know about next door, but I think 2 doors down was Abercrombie and Fitch, which was super cool at the time. When it came to the plaza, I was like, "Oh, that's all awesome." And so we went in there, and I was just like, "Oh, this stuff's so cool." We were just looking around. We're just wasting time. And I remember I saw a coat, and I was like, "Oh man, that thing's awesome." And I had just watched, oh, what was that movie with Robin Williams? Oh my gosh, what is that? I gotta think of it. Robin Williams teacher movie, Dead Poet Society. So I'm watching I just got done watching Dead Poet Society of all these like young men who end up being, famous actors. But they're all with these private school upper, East Coast kids, and they had on these navy blue, like, I don't even know what you'd call them, peacoats or something. It was the one that had like the tassels that you would put through. There were like 3 or 4 of those, and they're blue with a big blue hood. And I was seeing it, and I was like, oh man, that's just like what all those dudes wear. I love that look. That was cool. And she's like, we should get it. And I was like, yes, we should. And I was like, oh, that's funny. So we look at the tag, and I still remember this, right? It says 285. 285 for a coat now, I'd still be like, woo, man, they're proud of that thing. This would have been in, when was that? That was right before, so it was probably my senior year because I had it my last year of school, then I had it at Mizzou. And I love that coat. I actually just got rid of that coat like 3 months ago because I was trying to, it was a coat I had when I was, 5'10", 145 pounds. So I've kept it forever because I loved it. And it was so good. And it was so warm. It was everything about it. I was like, man, it was a great coat. But I just remember it was so cool that Mom said, let's go ahead and get it. And so I remember thinking that's how Kit and Katie have this now because Dad was making good money. He was in a good job now. Everything was, it was when they were it was probably right before they were taking off to go live in California for a while for this job. And Dad was making good money. And I remember that she bought that and we put it in a bag and we went to the parking lot. And we went from the parking lot or went and found the parking lot where the car was parked, and we put it in the car. And Mom was like, "Don't tell your dad because he'll kill me that I did that." But yeah, you need a good winter coat. You're bigger now than you're outgrowing your other ones. You need one for college, and so she was like, "Let's just do it." And so I think it was those little things. It was those little times. I think Mom probably would have been a good rich lady. She liked to splurge on the little niceties here and there. But I think that those were just some things when it says what is one of your favorite memories of your mother? I think it's those little things, right? I think the birthday dinners were super sweet and nice, and that was kind of what we would get each year. But more than that, it was the oatmeal cream pie, the Little Debbie's or the Hostess treat that just, and it wasn't every time when she would pick you up. It was just randomly. And, as a kid that's seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, you're like, oh man, that's awesome. And I didn't think about it then, but I noticed it later in life. And I was like, oh, that was sweet of her to think like, hey, I got to go pick up Benji. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to grab something out of there because I know he'll like a little sweet treat after basketball practice. So I just love that little idea that where she's thinking of you. And it probably hits me harder now than it did back then because of, now she can't think of that kind of stuff. She's not going to go out and, you know, dad buys the gifts and Katie helps buy in the gifts and Katie wraps the gifts and, mom doesn't have anything to do with any of those kind of things anymore. It's just not something that she can do. So remembering back when she could and when she could, she would, if money allowed it. And so that's why I think it's the nice part about it is that that was maybe what they could afford then. And so that was what she could do and she did. And so I think that's the part that I love about that and those little stories and those memories. But I will always remember those little treats when she would pick me up and getting that coat and hiding it from dad and thinking, oh man, that's pretty fun to get I think that would be like buying a $700 or $800 coat now, maybe $1,000. I don't know. That we're talking 1991, 1992. 35 years ago. Can't tell me that coats haven't doubled or tripled. It was $285, so it was probably $300 with tax and everything. And you're like, that was a huge number. I remember thinking though that I had the best coat of anybody at college. I probably didn't. But to be honest, I might have. I might have had one of the best 100 coats at Mizzou out of 25,000 kids. And I loved it because of that. Because I could wear whatever I wanted if I had jeans and, decent shoes like boots on, in the winter and that coat on. I just thought, man, I look really good because, as long as I had decent shoes, and I always have been kind of a shoe person. And so I always had good boots from like J. Crew or Timberland or something. So I had good boots, jeans were jeans, and I had that coat. I was like, man, I look great. I felt great. So I love that. And so, yeah, those are my favorite memories. Whew, man, that tore me up there for a while, but that's good. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. So that's my answer for this question. See you guys.